It is truly an honor to be here today for the 2017 MLK Diversity Address. Today's address is a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and serves as a reminder that although we have made strides in our society, there is still so much more to accomplish, and that all of us have a role to play in that feat. In his words, and I quote, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality," end quote. The MLK Diversity Address aims to stimulate critical thinking and challenge normative thoughts and behaviors. We hope that you will be open to receiving the message of peace and be empowered to make a renewed commitment to social equity. Please do not interrupt the program or address at any time. And while I'm at it, just a few more housekeeping rules. Please, no video or audio recordings of tonight's program. Pictures are permitted, however, we ask that you refrain from using the flash and blinding our performers and our speaker. Place all cell phones on silent or vibrate. Please step out quietly if you need to take a call, as to minimize disruptions and cause the entire room to turn and stare at you. Lastly, we hope that you will all join us at the reception immediately following the program. The reception is located in the Student Union lobby, right outside those doors. Yes, that means there is food. Thank you. Our official welcome for today's address will be provided by Dr. Corey King. Dr. Corey King is the Vice President for the Division of Student Affairs. He is responsible for all aspects of student life and for promoting a campus culture that embraces academic excellence, social and personal development, and civic responsibility. We thank him for his commitment to diversity and inclusion and to his unwavering commitment to our students. Without further ado, Dr. Corey King.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Good evening and welcome to the 2017 MLK Diversity Address. As Dr. Oliver stated, my name is Dr. King and I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs. And on behalf of President Kelly and the leadership of the university, I welcome all of you, especially our keynote speaker tonight. Welcome to our country. Tonight is, when we celebrate Dr. King, it's very personal for me. People think my name is Dr. King. So people always ask me, are we celebrating you? And, you think about what that means, and I want to share then a personal story to put things in perspective for people as I give welcome. Yes, my last name is Dr. King, and growing up in the household with my mom and dad, they loved Dr. King. They talked about him every day, and in fact, we had a picture of Dr. King in our home. What people don't know about me is I have a brother who was born July 17th, that's my birthday, 5 years apart. We were born on the exact same day, 5 years apart. He was my older brother, and for sentimental reasons, his name was Luther King. Unfortunately, my brother passed away unexpectedly in 1999. But I always remember on this day when people say Martin Luther King, I take to that Luther, and I remember the life and legacy of my brother. My parents, when they talked about Dr. King, always talked about leaving a legacy, being more important to others than you are to yourself. They talked about servanthood. And one of the things my parents taught me was never look to others to do what you can do. So many times in society, we look to other people to make a difference. And in my welcome to our students especially, I challenge you tonight. I challenge you to leave a legacy. and to make a difference. And wherever you go in life, wherever your plot of land is, make a difference there. Leave your legacy and never leave things the same way you found them. That is important. Being here at FAU, I have the wonderful opportunity to work with faculty, staff, and students. And you will see here in the crowd tonight that we have wonderful, talented faculty who are always supporting the advancement and the development of our students. We have staff here who work with our students every day, as well as community leaders and members. And most importantly, we have you, the students. I want to say, as the speaker comes tonight, as we begin to continue the celebration of this wonderful legacy, begin to think about your own legacy. And what do you want people to remember you by? Mark your place, make your stance, let your voice be heard. But in doing that, do it in an environment of mutual respect and understanding, where people around you feel valued and appreciated by the contribution that you will make to society. So once again, I thank you. I thank Dr. Oliver, Artie Jameson, and all of those people who made tonight possible. Thank you for participating tonight. Thank you for helping us to remember the legacy. Thank you for celebrating the diversity of Dr. King and what he's done and what you now will continue to do as his legacy and your legacy live on. Go Owls.
Thank you, Dr. King. At this time, I would like to introduce your MC and the host for today's program, Mr. Francis Jen. Francis Jen is an FAU student majoring in communications with a minor in entrepreneurship. He serves as a student assistant in the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs and is a proud member of the registered student organization, Combat Creole. A descendant of Haiti, Francis was raised in a household that encouraged empowerment, education, and hard work. And apparently smiles, because every time I see him, he's smiling. Francis is currently a senior and will be graduating in spring of 2018. Please welcome Francis Jean.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver, for that wonderful introduction. How you guys doing today, by the way? So thank you again, Dr. Oliver, for that wonderful introduction, and I'm really excited for everybody coming out here today. We have a wonderful treat for you guys, and I'd like to, not only do we have our keynote speaker here tonight, we also have musical performances and student performance as well. So if everybody could please rise for the national anthem, and it'll be sung by Alexandria Thomas.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Alexandria. Please stay, remain standing. I'd also like to welcome Miss Ashley Williams up to the stage for the singing of the Negro National Anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Oh, sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
All right, you may all be seated now. Next host I'd like to welcome up here is Miss Tyler Hodges. Miss Tyler Hodges is a native of Jacksonville, Florida. She currently is in her second year of graduate school at Florida Atlantic University, where she will receive her Master's of Education in May. We have a pleasure of having her to serve as our graduate assistant in the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs, where she is tirelessly devoted her time, talent, and love for all things social justice. Ms. Tyler not only has had a huge impact in our office, but she has also served in organizations such as the Elite Owl Student Organization, the National Council of Negro Women, and Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her friends, family, and blossoming as a Mary Kay beauty consultant and transforming lives as an entrepreneur with her organization, Sister Soul Glow. I'd like to welcome Ms. Tyler Hodges up to the stage.
Thank you so much, Frances, my favorite student worker. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you all have enjoyed our program thus far and are excited for our performances to come. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Mr. Shaun King. Jeffrey Shaun King, born September 17, 1979, is an American writer and civil rights activist. He is noted for his use of social media to promote religious, charitable, and social causes, including the Black Lives Matter movement. He is the senior justice writer for the New York Daily News. Previously, he was a contributing writer for Daily Cause. So now I'll have Francis come back and introduce our next performer, and we can't wait to hear you, Mr. King.
Before I introduce Mr. King to take the stage, I'd like to give you guys another treat. And I'd like to welcome, do one moment, please. I'd like to welcome Alexandria Thomas to the stage once again for our performance. One moment, guys. Oh, okay. Oh, that's how I said. So speaking of legacies, we have a lot of Haitians in here, descendants from their family members. Can anybody stand up and give me something they'd like to leave behind? Anybody? Don't be scared. Nobody? All right, okay. She's ready. Oh, yes. Oh, go ahead. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for your wise words of wisdom. And I'd like to welcome Alexandria Thomas to the stage.
All right, I'll be singing At Last from Etta James. At last, my love has come along. My lonely days are over, and life is like a song. At last, the skies above are blue. My heart was wrapped up in clover the night I looked at you. I found a dream to press my cheek to, a dream that I can call my own. I found a thrill that I could speak to, a thrill that I have never known. Oh, you smiled, and then the spell was cast, and here we are in heaven, for you are mine at last.
Thank you again, Alexandria. And I'd like to welcome Ms. Sharika up to the stage for a poem. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, I heard about 5 people. I'm gonna try that again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Are we enjoying ourselves this evening? All right, I heard about 5 more people. All right, we're getting there, we're getting there.
They're mad at your skin and how it sinks in the sun. Like, black boy, don't crack. I wrote my love for you in 17 syllables. Hands up, overhead, 2016 bullet nooses look, strange fruit sidewalks, chalked up haikus on notebook pavements like your story could be told in one breath, like you're breathtaking, like they took your breath away, like they left you there breathless, like can you breathe? Summer breeze that you won't breathe in but swing, and yet they're still breathing Skittles with hoods up, open wounds left in the hood. Modern riot pop hoods don't tell me to be silent. I have 51 syllables that won't choke up my voice box. I used to have this obsession with mixed children because of 50% chance of them living, so I'm sorry if I didn't take the time to love you soon. I'm piss poor, I'm praising you. I can't imagine my 14-year-old brother flirting with death, Lynch character, flat lungs, another newsreel of broadcasted lies. Your breath will not be televised, and I'm sick and tired of seeing your story being plot twisted into resistance. Like, how is it resisting in an upward motion? 3/5 of the truth at organized crime scene. Some of you are living and dying at the same time. 40 acres on a mule on Wall Street pavements. They call it a glass ceiling. Why not call it black woman? Call it African American. Call it Negro. Black like black boy don't crack. 26 bullet nooses. Look, strange fruit sidewalks. Your beautiful black body outlined in chalked up haikus, guarded by yellow tape, decorated in flashing red and blue lights. Another mother's cry silenced by the sirens, but don't be silent. These are the uncomfortable conversations they don't want us to have, but don't be silent. Acquitted courtrooms may mute the truth, but don't be silent. Underground Railroad with your voice boxes, show them that keloid tongues can lash out too. And I know they left you there for your skin to swallow up the sun and bleed out the justice while they blame it on resistance. So I apologize that I attempted to write my love for you in 17 syllables and chalked up haikus on notebook pavements, like your story could be told in one breath, like you're breathtaking, like they took your breath away, like they continue to lay you there breathless, like, can you breathe?
Wow. Y'all put your hands together. Yeah, powerful. Thank you all so much for having me. It's my honor and privilege to be here. Thank all of you who graced the stage. It takes a lot of, like, I can't sing or do poetry. I speak all over the country, but I swear, like, watching all of you sing and do poetry made me nervous. Like, if I had the thought, if I could sing, I would probably sing before I spoke everywhere I went, just because I knew how to sing. And so, it's beautiful though, and I'm honored to be here with you all tonight. And I came here from Louisiana. I was in Baton Rouge and spoke at LSU last night, and the night before that, I was in North Dakota. And listen, this is crazy. It got 50 below zero. I didn't even know that was a thing that happened in the United States. It was so cold that when you would walk, somebody came and picked me up at the hotel, and you would walk from the hotel to the car, and like it took your breath away. And so to go from North Dakota to Florida has been a shock to my system. And but I'm glad to be here. I spent most of my adult life in Atlanta. I went to school in Atlanta. My wife and I were married. Our kids were born there. So I came to Florida all the time. I moved to New York recently, but I spent a lot of time here in Florida. And man, I spent a lot of time in Haiti as well. And so I used to do a lot of work in Haiti, and when I did, I would always come to Miami or Fort Lauderdale first. And so it's always cool to be with my Haitian sisters and brothers. And so just glad to be here with all of you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the staff. And you know, I have some things that I want to share with you. And you know, there's a lot going on in our country. And some of you, what I wanted to share with you is some of what people have told me just over the past few days. Can you see this? Do you need me to do something to take the screen to the next one? Or you just let me know. But I spoke on Sunday. I got to speak at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, which was a powerful moment for me. And that was Sunday afternoon, and then Sunday night I spoke in New Jersey. And each place I spoke, from Sunday until last night, somebody came up to me after the program, men and women both times, crying in part because of their fear for where our country is going right now. Like yesterday, I was at LSU, and it's a tough moment to experience with somebody, but a grown man, like an emotionally mature, mentally stable, grown man, came up to me and was bawling because of his uncertainty and fear of where our country is going. And I don't think people fully have investigated why that is and what that means. And as I spend a lot of time talking to people, and I'll be at the reception here afterwards, and we can take 400 selfies, and you can ask whatever question you want, and we can just hang out all night. But what people are really telling me is it's not so much that they are afraid of what they know, it's that they're afraid of the uncertainty of what's ahead. Like how many people have ever watched a horror movie before, right? You know, the scariest part of the horror movie isn't the moment the monster jumps out. It's like when you think the monster might jump out and it doesn't happen. Like, it's like when you don't know what's around the corner, when you don't know what's in the room, there's a sense of dread there. And that's like the scariest movies don't have monsters all in them. It's just you're not sure what's there. And I think that's it sounds goofy, but that's a huge part of what's happening right now, is that we're looking at the country and we just don't know what's next. I think, like, you invited me, so I'm just gonna speak like me, okay? You don't have to agree with everything I say, and I would be shocked if you did, but I'll just tell you my truth. But Donald Trump has shown us enough over the course of his adult life. He's 70 years old. He has a body of work. He has a personal history. You know, Dr. King said, and conservatives love to use this quote, and I looked all over Twitter and Facebook to see if conservatives would quote it this past week, and I saw none of them saying it. Dr. King said that we should not judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Conservatives aren't really saying that anymore. Because the man they elected president, you really can't judge him by the content of his character. Because if you judge him by the content of his character, it comes back void. Even just over the past week, as he continues to harass John Lewis. John Lewis is a legend, a hero. He is an essential figure, one of the last living survivors of the march across the bridge in Selma. He's the last living person to speak at the March on Washington. And to see Donald Trump repeatedly harass a man like that gives you a glimpse into his character. And I mean, that's just small things. But I mean, people, particularly when I speak to immigrant communities, when I speak to communities of color, when I speak to people in oppressed and marginalized communities, folk are very much unsure of what a Donald Trump presidency means for them. And I'm concerned about it. And a huge part of what I'll teach today is the historical context for how we got here, and give us context for exactly where we are, and then point us where we need to go from here and how we do it. As they prepare these slides, there are a few things that I want to talk about. You know, do you all have an ad drop period here, like during registration? Did you just go, are you still in your ad drop period? You just passed it. So this is gonna make sense in a second, but I was in grad school in the spring of 2015, and I want to give you some context for what was going on at that time, because so much has happened in our country even since then. Cool, yeah, that's right. Yes, keep that up, okay? Let me test this to make sure it goes from slide to slide. Yeah, perfect. Hey, thanks for your work with that. So in the spring of 2015, I was enrolled in a graduate history program. And have you ever had that moment where you got in a class and you were like, I definitely registered for the wrong class? So I got into class and I was like, oh, this is gonna be brutal. It's gonna be brutal. And I just knew, I mean, it was on the list of classes that I could take for the program, but I had the thought right away, like, I'm not gonna make it through this class. And I was in a deep funk. And any of you who know me, that's not my way. I'm an optimistic person. I was a pastor for almost 15 years of my life, and so I've spent a lot of my time trying to motivate and inspire people. But in the spring of 2015, a lot of us who had dedicated our lives to activism in this work, I mean, we were in a really bad place. Yeah, that's good, man. And in that fall, and many of you were students here, and even those of you who were in high school will remember, in the fall of 2014, a lot of things changed in our country. I'm 37 years old, and most of you know me from my profile picture on Twitter and Facebook. And so it's a weird thing to see the profile picture walking and talking and moving. But I lived a full life before this movement. And 37 is not old, but I'm married. I have 5 kids. I was a pastor. I was a high school history and civics teacher. I started a tech company and sold it. You could Google, I have 3 patents for an app that we launched called Upfront. You know, like before most of you knew me, I was doing other stuff. And, you know, traditionally I've been an incredibly optimistic person, but in the summer of 2014, I was living in California, and I was working for an environmental charity called Global Green, an amazing charity. And I was doing work on green energy and marginalized communities and what environmental racism looks like in black communities. And I oversaw communications for this charity. And I got an email that July that changed my life. And that's how life works. You can't predict or plan these little moments that change the entire direction of how you go. And I'd never gotten an email like this. And when I was a student at Morehouse in Atlanta, I was an activist even as a college student. I led protests in 98 and 99 when Amadou Diallo was shot and killed in New York, when a brother named Shaun was shot and killed in New York on his wedding day. Both of them were unarmed, nonviolent black men who didn't deserve even to be confronted or arrested, more or less shot the way they were. But I hadn't been doing that work in a long time, but there's something weird, and a lot of you will experience this. When you leave college, like, how many of you have a Facebook account? And how many of you are friends with people from college? Well, when you leave and go your separate ways, a lot of your college classmates will always know you the way you were in college. So like 25 years from now, people are gonna know you for your spoken word. Like you could be doing something totally different, but people are almost frozen in time on Facebook because a lot of my Facebook friends from college, I haven't seen them face to face since then. So one of my college buddies, he emailed me. He said, man, there's this video that a friend of mine posted on YouTube. And he said, Shaun, he said, it's terrible. He said, there's this guy, it's a big guy, looks like he's maybe in his 40s, and the police are confronting him on a sidewalk, and they wrestle him to the ground, and they choke him to death. And it's on YouTube. And he said, you can see the brother saying over and over and over again, I can't breathe. And here's how much things have changed. A video like that had never been shared publicly before. And I didn't even know if I wanted to click on it. I was at my job, and it was not that type of place. Like, the word woke wasn't even being used in July of 2014. But whatever we called it in July 2014, like, people at my job were not woke, right? So I didn't even know if I wanted to click on it. But I clicked on it. And it was exactly the way he described it. I was shook. I can't explain what it did to me, in part because it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that. A few hours later, I learned that that Eric Garner, like myself, was a father with a big family, that his family relied on him in every way imaginable. Later that evening, into the next morning, I learned that chokeholds had been banned. I don't know why they were ever legal, but they had been banned in New York for over 10 years by police. And so I had the thought, and it made a lot of sense at the time. I had the thought, what that man did, what that officer, Daniel Pantaleo, did, that was wrong and it was illegal. And I'm going to share this video, and he's going to be arrested. That's what I thought. It sounds ridiculous today, but back then it made every bit of sense. And for 3 weeks, I was doing a terrible job. I started doing a terrible job at my actual job. I became obsessed with this case. I taught myself how to edit videos. I taught myself how to do Photoshop and how to put captions. And because I felt like, I'm going to share this, I'm going to tell the world about it, and damn it, somebody's going to be held responsible. And literally, while I was writing a story just to my friends on Facebook about Eric Garner, another brother who lived in St. Louis texted me. And he said, man, there's something crazy going on in a neighborhood. I'm just telling you how it happened. In a neighborhood called Ferguson. Ferguson is a town. We called it a neighborhood. And he said, there's some guys in the neighborhood live streaming, and there's a kid laying in the middle of the street, and his blood is rolling down the street. And I had the thought like, oh my God, this is crazy. This should never be normal. I clicked on it. It was a live video. You could hear people screaming. People were growing furious. He'd already been there for about 2 hours. And people were pissed. And I saw it, and I could see blood flowing down the street. And I had the thought, oh my God. This is what I thought. Oh my God. They're killing folk every 2 or 3 weeks. Then the next day, I got an email and it said, Shaun, there was a brother at a Walmart in Ohio, and he was on the phone in the pet food section talking to his girlfriend, and police come up and unload their guns on him. Again, I had the thought, that can't be what really happened. I didn't have all the context that we have now. And I saw the video, and there was John Crawford on the phone with his girlfriend, and some man lied and said that John Crawford had a gun and was pointing it at people and called 911. Police legitimately thought there was a threat. Came and saw him and shot and killed him right there on the spot. And then I realized, wow, they're not killing us every 2 or 3 weeks. It's every 2 or 3 days. And then I learned it wasn't every 2 or 3 days. It was 2 or 3 times every day. So a lot of us who were doing something completely different said, I am so disturbed that I can't shake it. I got to talk about it. I have to protest. I have to tell somebody, and we're going to get some justice. Fighting for those cases. This is a trend. I got another email. Man, there was a 12-year-old, but this is all fall of 2014. There was a 12-year-old boy playing in the park of his own neighborhood. Police roll up and shoot him there on the spot. And that was Tamir Rice. And for July and August and September and October and November, hundreds of thousands of us, including many of you, fought and protested and marched, and we tweeted and we Facebooked and we cried, all because we thought we would get some justice. And then case after case after case after case, we learned, no, there would be no justice. And in December and then into January, a lot of us realized that the world operated in this country operated by a different set of rules. That what looked like injustice to us would not be treated like injustice by the system. And a lot of the things that I thought would work, and for about 4.5 months, I don't have a history of failure in my life. Like, I'd never given anything so much effort and it not worked. Like, I had never experienced pouring everything I had into something and it not work even a little bit. I'd never experienced that. And so here I am in January. I enrolled for this incredibly crappy class that I told you about a second ago. And I said, I'm dropping this class. I'm already in a funk. I'm in a bad place. I don't need a terrible class in my life right now. So I went to the add drop link, and I'd already waited a little too long. And if you wait too long, I was still within the time frame, but if you wait too long, I looked, I was like, okay, what can I drop and what can I add? I needed a class, and it was like, the only thing that was left was like advanced badminton or something like that. You know, there was nothing credible left for me to take. So I had the thought, okay, I'm stuck. I'm stuck with this class. I'm gonna take it. Let me clear my mind. Let me hunker down. Let me try to focus. Let me get through my funk. I'm gonna take this class. It was, if I had my way, I would have dropped it. It didn't work out, and it was a divine moment, because the lesson that I learned in that class is the lesson that I want to teach you today. And for the rest of 2015, for all of 2016, into 2017, and as I look forward to what we're going to experience in this country together, this lesson has shaped and colored how I view where we are right now as a country and where we're going. And so I'm gonna share that lesson with you. And my hope is, I didn't come today necessarily to inspire you, because when I talk to people right now, people are rather inspired. You're bothered already. Like, you don't need me to get you more bothered, right? I want to teach you something. I want to teach you something that I think will help you, give you context and understanding for where we are, how we got here, and where we go. So, hey man, will you bring me one of those waters right underneath where you are? On the screen right here, see, thank you. Most people are surprised to see a big, hairy white face at a Black Lives Matter presentation. But this guy is important, okay? And I want to tell you a story. His name is Leopold von Ranke. And a lot of people, if you Google that name, Leopold von Ranke, on Wikipedia or anywhere else, he is mainly called the father of the study of history. And I don't know if any of you are history majors, or obviously you've all taken a history course, but in the 1850s, there really was not such a thing as history as an academic discipline. You could not major in history. You could not get a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD in history. It was not a field of study in the world. People talked about history, people reflected on history, but it was not something that you could become a master of. And Leopold von Ranke was himself a master of history, and he decided to do something in the mid-1850s that was, at the time, a revolutionary undertaking. He decided that he wanted to create, and it sounds so basic now, he decided that he wanted to create a timeline of human history. Now, to explain to you how difficult that was, obviously, you and I know that in the 1850s, there was no internet, there were no computers, there was no Google, no Wikipedia. But deeper than that, there really was very little travel. Some studies say that 98% of the people in 1850 never left their country, ever. People were not flying. A trip across the world, a trip across the country often cost people their lives. So people were very local, very national, and people knew very little about how the world worked. And Leopold von Ranke decided he wanted to create a timeline of world history. And doing it took him about 35 years. It was his life's work. He literally collected not thousands, but tens of thousands of books and source documents. And I imagine that he created something that looked a little bit like this. This is a picture of about 5,000 people. Now, if you look on there closely, does anybody know who Rerun from What's Happening is? It's a young audience. Do you see Rerun? You don't see him? It's like Where's Waldo, but where's Rerun? In the corner with what? What does he have on? A red hat. If you don't know Rerun, your life is not fully complete. And what you should do is go to YouTube later and Google and search on YouTube, Rerun What's Happening dance. You have to put dance. Does anybody know that dance? Is anybody brave enough? Will you do the dance? You raised your hand and said you knew it, man. But can you do it? I have a feeling you can. I'm feeling it. Not today? You said not today? Oh, man. You really left me hanging. What's your name, man? Okay. But you have to see it. Yeah, you have to see it for yourself. It's worth watching. But Leopold von Ranke created, it was, in some ways, it was a list of every hero, every villain, every artist, every inventor. Like, this is just a weird, eclectic collage of faces. And he did something very similar to that. He decided he wanted to know who was every essential, important figure throughout human history. Who led wars? Who invented what? Who were the greatest artists? And he tried to go all the way back to the beginning of human history. And when he did it, he saw a trend that really freaked him out. Because in the 1850s, the prevailing sentiment of the day, which psychologists will say is still the primary sentiment in our world today, most people believed that human beings were steadily getting better. I'm gonna see if this mic works if I come down on the floor, okay? So I'm gonna come back over here and give y'all some love in just a second, all right? So most people thought that human beings, say this was the 1500s and 1600s and 17 and 18 and 19, the 2000s and beyond, most people thought that human beings were steadily getting better, and that was a view in science, but it was deeper than that. And even what psychologists say today is that there's something in us that wants to believe human beings are steadily evolving. And that's what most of us think today, and I'll prove it to you. Leopold von Ranke, when he began studying human history, immediately came up against a challenge because it looked like sometimes human beings were amazing and peaceful and collaborative and cooperative, and creative and treated each other in wonderful ways. And then there would be huge swaths of human history where human beings were terrible. And what he realized is that when he created a timeline of human history, when he laid it all out in a linear way, what he realized is that human beings looked more like this. Can you see that? That sometimes human beings are amazing, like here at the peak. Sometimes human beings are cooperative and peaceful, and they get along and they treat each other with love and respect in history. And then sometimes human beings are absolutely terrible. What he found was that human history was not this linear progression where people in the 1600s were a little better than they were in the 1500s. In the 17, they were better than the 16s. What he found when he studied it, that the quality of humanity was not on a linear progression, but that humanity throughout history was more like peaks and valleys. He didn't use the word roller coaster. I don't believe there were roller coasters where he was, but it was more like a roller coaster of highs and lows. But to this very day, most of us still want to believe that human beings are steadily getting better. Let me give you an illustration. I did a study about 3 months ago, and it was at like a low point in our country where there was some really, really ugly stuff going on, not only in Donald Trump's campaign, but with police brutality. And I searched Google and Twitter and Facebook, and it took me several weeks to find, let me take it back to this, to this. I searched Google and Twitter and Facebook for the number of times that people said this phrase. And tell me if you've heard it, or maybe you've said it. And I'm not judging you, I've said it. There was some really ugly stuff going on, particularly stuff around white supremacists and neo-Nazis who were endorsing Donald Trump and supporting him and attending his events, and the Klan had endorsed him. And people said, man, what is this, the 60s? Had you heard that phrase? Here's what they were saying. Let me explain it. What they were really, they didn't know they were saying it like this, but what they were really saying, let's pretend this is the 1900s. 1900, 1920, 40, 60, 80, 2000s, and beyond. What people were really saying when they say we're right here, when they say, hey, what is this, the 60s? What they're trying to tell you is, I thought we were here, but it sure feels like we're here. So when people say, damn, what's going on? It feels like the 60s. What they're saying is, I thought humanity was a linear progression, and it sure feels like we're going back in time. That's another phrase that I searched, and people regularly said that phrase. I mean, I saw thousands and thousands. I'm not talking about celebrities, just everyday people saying, it feels like we're going back in time. It doesn't feel like we're going back in time. What they mean is, I thought we had progressed, and all of a sudden, it feels like we haven't progressed. And what I need you to understand is the reason it doesn't feel like we've progressed is because that's not how humanity works. Humanity works like this. It's up and down, up and down. If this is true, if humanity is a steady quality progression, if this is true, if that's real, how is he real? Or how is this real? This is a diagram for those of you who are not familiar with it. This is not an artist's rendering, but an actual diagram from the transatlantic slave trade where businessmen wanted to see how many human beings they could effectively fit on the ship and survive so that they could be properly bought and sold when they got to their arrival destination. Let me explain this. If humanity is steadily getting better, how do we explain that? Because here's the thing. In the scheme, now, for those of you over here, if you can see me, just know that I'm all the way over here at the beginning of the timeline. Let's imagine that the very first block is the first human being, okay? Right here in the corner is the early humans, and imagine this top right corner is us today. If these are the first humans and this is us today, this right here, the transatlantic slave trade, on this chart, it took place right here. If this chart represents all of human history, the transatlantic slave trade takes place in the middle of the final bar on the right. It's new. In the scheme, and see, here's the thing. If humanity is steadily improving, how do we explain that? This was not an anomaly or an outlier. This was 400 years of American history. How do we explain him and his back and his wounds? How do we explain the people who thought it was okay to do that? If humanity is steadily getting better, how do we explain this? How do we explain them? In many rooms where I speak, well, number one, there are still living survivors of the Holocaust. We talk about modern history. This is very modern. How do we explain this pile of shoes, of tens of thousands of shoes that are at a museum in Auschwitz, where men, women, and children, when they got to these internment camps, were made to take them off? How do we explain, if this is true, how do we explain Rwandan genocide? And many of you were alive when this happened, where 1 million people were hacked to death in about 45 days. This is at a Rwandan genocide museum. This is true because humanity does not work like this in a linear progression. That it is not true that 2017 is a little better than 2016. It's not true. It's not true that 2016 was a little better than 2015. It's damn sure not true. This is not true. We want it to be true. I absolutely wish it was true. But if this was true, that would mean Donald Trump is peak humanity. You can laugh. That's not even partisan. Conservatives don't even believe he's peak humanity. His approval rating is now in the 30s. No one has ever entered the White House after inauguration with an approval rate below 50%, because about 50% of people had to vote for your sorry self. So how could you be in the 30s when you just won the election? I can't, the math's not computing for me. But if this was true, then how do we explain Donald Trump? Before you say, man, he's kind of partisan. Did you know that in 1989, his wife testified under oath that he, quote unquote, brutally raped and assaulted me? That should have been the end of his public career. That 17 women have now come forward to say that he sexually assaulted them in one way or another. That he was actually recorded on tape saying, I sexually assault women. He said it in another way that I won't repeat it, but you heard it. He said he did it, then when women said, well, he did it to me, I've never done it before. Here's why it matters. Like, I want to speak about the country that we live in, the real place that we are right here and right now. I don't know if he came to Florida Atlantic. I don't know if he came here to the area. But Joe Biden has spoken on college campuses all over this country about the crisis of sexual assault on college campuses. Do you know why Joe Biden is able to do that? because it is universally accepted that he has impeccable integrity. I don't even agree with all of his philosophy and politics. There is not even a rumor of infidelity about Joe Biden. There's certainly not a rumor about sexual assault. He cusses on the mic every now and then. He's like kind of huggy, like kind of huggy, touchy. He has like really bright teeth, right? But he can go to a campus and speak about sexual assault because his integrity is not questioned. What will Donald Trump say about sexual assault? What could he say? This is not true. This is true. This is how humanity works. And I'm not saying that we're at that the lowest spot. I won't say that because we don't know what a Donald Trump presidency looks like. But we're definitely not at the peak. 102 completely unarmed black men, women, and children were killed by police in this country last year. Now, that number, 102, is very sterile, but just yesterday, I posted the picture online. I was with Alton Sterling's family, who was killed in Baton Rouge, and his family came out and visited me, and these are people. These are people's mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. And 102 unarmed black men, women, and children were killed by police. But I want to give it context. Does anybody know who this is? This is 25th president. It's on the tip of your tongue. Take a guess. Anybody? No. Harding. Yeah, nobody knows who won. Did you say Harding? You said it or you thought it? Because if you thought it, it doesn't count. He said, you heard, okay, someone next to you heard you say it, that counts. All right? Come give me a hug. Your prize is a hug after the program. You would have to go back to 1902 when Warren Harding was president to find a single year in this country where 102 or more African-American men, women, and children were lynched in this country. But 102 African-American men, women, and children, unarmed, were killed by police last year. Most of us, when we think about the history of lynching in America, think of the worst period as being in the 40s or 50s or 60s. But in most of the years, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they average in this country 2 to 4 lynchings per year, which they still treated like a crisis. Nationally, it was still viewed as a horrendous, immoral crisis during those decades. Well, that's how many folk effectively were lynched in this country last year. Did you know Dylan Roof, who just pled guilty for what he did to 9 beautiful souls in Charleston, South Carolina, did you know that what he did was the deadliest hate crime against black folk to happen in this country in 85 years? Not in the 40s, not in the 50s, not in the 60s, last year. See, I have to say that because it's hard to know a moment in history when you're in it. Because you're just living your life. Like when I wake up in the morning, I have 5 kids. I'm thinking I have to get them dressed. I have to feed the kids. I'm thinking about where I have to be. Like, it's hard enough for me to remember to, like, brush my teeth, to do my homework, to pay my bills. I don't walk around thinking, where am I on Leopold von Ranke's scheme of human history right now? Because we're just waking up and living. But we live in the era of the deadliest hate crime against black folk in 85 years. If this is true, how is this true? Here's the thing, because these are facts. This is a fact. This is a spreadsheet with data. And if this is true, then that can't be true. And if this is true, then that can't. One of these two graphics is true. And I know that that's true. If you look closely, at the bottom, it has time. And it goes from 1925 until modern America. How many of you have Netflix in the room? You have Netflix. For those of you who don't have it, borrow the password of somebody on your row. And when you borrow their password and log in, you should see a wonderful documentary from Ava DuVernay called 13th. She could have called the documentary The New Jim Crow. And the scholar, Michelle Alexander, who's brilliant, is the primary voice throughout the documentary, but she was the inspiration for the documentary. The book, New Jim Crow, is something that you should own. And I have to say this, you should own it and you should read it. Because it's one thing to own a book, it's another thing to own it and download it on Kindle and then push the button to open it and read it. Or to get the physical, you have to read it. But the documentary 13th is actually like a video, in essence, a video explanation of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. And in it, what the book and the documentary, what they both explain is that in the 1970s, during the Nixon administration, and this is not a theory, they provide evidence and transcripts and audio of the Nixon administration basically saying that they want to find a way to criminalize blackness. You can't very well say it's illegal to be black. So they sought out to find a way to create new crimes that were not yet crimes of behaviors that they thought they could enforce crimes over top of communities. So all of a sudden, hundreds and hundreds of new laws began getting passed. And things that had never been illegal became illegal. And what you see is steady America's prison population. Then you see a 2,000% explosion. And a lot of people look at this chart and they make a very easy mistake and say, or they look at injustice in America. They look at any incident of injustice, be it something you've seen here in Florida or around the country, and they say, wow, the justice system is broken. And I have to correct people and say, no, it's actually not broken. It is functioning exactly the way it was designed and built to function. That is not broken. That's a well-oiled machine. It was built to do that. That does not happen on accident. A small wave at the bottom could be accidental, but that spike is on purpose. If this is true, how is that true? Or how is that true? We currently have the highest rate of imprisonment of any country in the world. Not only do we have more people in prison than any country in the world, I have to tell you where we are right now. We currently have more people in prison than any country in the history of the world. And it's a very old world. I mean, think about that. Right now, this moment, we have more prisoners than any country you can imagine. All of them. Currently, we have a higher rate of imprisonment than apartheid in South Africa. Here's what's wild. If we lined 100 people up, liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, and said, was apartheid an unethical and even evil, unjust system? 99 of them, except for the Dylan Roofs of the world, 99 people out of 100 across partisan lines would say, yeah, that was ugly and evil. But if you line those same 100 people up and ask them about this system, and said, is this system evil and unjust and wrong? It wouldn't be 99 out of 100. But when we compare our metrics up against apartheid or any injustice in the history of the world, we outrank that. If this is true, how is this true? I want to show you this. Have you seen this? This is a pool party in McKinney, Texas. And feel free, if you don't want to see this, feel free to check out for a second. I want to give you some historical context. I want to explain some things. I'm going to stop it right there. I'm going to tell you what just happened. I interviewed many of these young people. And do you all have neighborhoods around here that have clubhouses and swimming pools? In McKinney, Texas, this was at a neighborhood. See, when I asked that question in North Dakota, they don't do clubhouses and swimming pools in North Dakota. They don't do that. They don't do that. That's a down south thing. So this was a diverse, affluent neighborhood in the suburbs of Dallas, McKinney, Texas. And some of the kids who you see here lived in the neighborhood, and they decided one Saturday to have a pool party. And these were young kids. These were babies. They were in 8th and 9th grade. And they decided to have a pool party. Their parents approved. They invited kids over. And I won't even get into the complexities of black folk and swimming, but most of the kids weren't even swimming, right? Most of the kids, they were just hanging out at the pool. Like you see, nobody's wet, right? It's not. It's not. Some kids were in the pool, but most of them weren't. They were just chilling. And I need to explain it because people don't know, but I want you to be clear that the kids were not smoking, they were not drinking, they were not smoking cigarettes or weed, they were not doing drugs, they were not touching inappropriately on each other. They were talking and hanging out on a summer day at the pool in their neighborhood. But somebody saw them and didn't recognize them. Somebody white saw them and didn't recognize them and called the police. He shows up first because he was in the area. He begins throwing the kids all around like rag dolls, telling them to get on the ground. You'll see boys all over the place with their hands behind. They were swimming. Why does he have to have his hands behind his back? And he fixates himself on one particular young girl in a two-piece bathing suit. She's 14. She's clearly unarmed. She's no danger. No one reported a threat or a fight. There were no fights. And he begins manhandling her, swinging her around. In a minute, I won't have us watch what he does, but he gets her on the ground and puts his knee on her back and is ramming her face into the ground, and she's screaming for her mother. And these two boys, these two young brothers who were on the far side, they saw it, and it was ripping them to shreds. To see their friend, it should have, to see their friend assaulted and mauled by a man who had no business doing it. So they decided to do in that moment, they weren't thinking about it, this was unfolding very quickly. They decided, I'm going to get her and snatch her out of here. He decides to pull his gun out. We're talking about a pool party. This has never happened to white folk in this country. This is a uniquely black experience. If that chart is true, how is this incident true? How is this true? This officer, Ben Fields, who was the strength and conditioning coach for the high school football team. If you Google right now, Ben Fields weightlifting, he's the type of guy who films himself lifting weights and he posts the videos on YouTube. He's that guy. So he's on there, he's all over YouTube with videos like putting his muscles in the mirror and stuff. For real, no joke. He's a police officer. And in this moment, I came to know this young lady and her family, because I know her attorney, who was taught to tie some things together. Her attorney was a brother named Todd Rutherford, who was best friends with the pastor who was shot and killed by Dylan Roof. You see how these injustice connects us together in weird ways. She lives with a foster family, and they bought her a cell phone. And she had her cell phone out in class, and the teacher asked her to put it back. How many of you are teachers or are training to be teachers? I was a high school civics and history teacher. The teacher did something really inappropriate, just dumb. After she put her phone up, he then changed his mind and said, no, bring me the phone. But he said, put it up. She put it up. The conflict was resolved. He created a new conflict, and at that moment, she just froze. I've seen another video in that class. I spoke to students in that class. She said nothing. We have this weird thing now where you don't know who's telling the truth and who's not online. So white supremacists got online and started saying that she yelled and she fought. That's a complete lie, complete fabrication. She froze up. She almost went comatose right there. She said nothing. The teacher then called the principal, who at the moment called the police. Why did he call the police? Because in South Carolina, they have passed laws to make misbehavior in schools a crime. Not detention, but a crime. When we see Ben Fields in this moment, he has been in that classroom for about 5 seconds. He comes straight into the classroom, and this is Ben Fields. He throws her about 6 feet and then gets on her and puts her hands behind her back and handcuffs her. She had a phone out in class. And then he arrests the young sister who filmed this as well. And when this happened, I had several elders from the civil rights movement call me and say, Shaun, in all of my history, I never saw our people brutalized by police in the school. In other words, they were confused as well because they thought we had progressed past that, only to find that they were seeing things that they didn't see in the civil rights movement. If that chart is true, how is this true? Do you see a man in a red hat? Do you see a red hat? What does that red hat say? That man is Matthew Heimbach, a well-known white, you could Google him. He is a well-known white supremacist who frequents Donald Trump's events and rallies and passes out material and recruits people. Matthew Heimbach. This young lady was a junior at the University of Louisville. Brilliant young lady. And she's so smart. She had the thought, this was early in the primaries. She had the thought, before anybody, that Donald Trump could win the primary and become president. I talked to her that day. She had the thought, she can't stand Donald Trump. She had the thought, I just want to go and see it for myself. Like, is this town that y'all live in, is it kind of boring? Is it kind of boring around here a little bit? I don't know. But in Louisville, where she lives, it's kind of boring. And so people find things to do. And she had a moment where she just thought, I'm going to go see it. She was not a protester. What she was a black woman at an event that was really seen as a white man's event. And Donald Trump himself singled her out. You can hear it on all of the videos, and begins telling the men to get her out. And they do. She's scared to death right here. This man, I wrote the first article about this incident. And when I wrote it, one second. When I wrote the article, did you see the man in the hat, the veteran? I wrote the article about him. I didn't know his name, and so I called him a veteran. And somebody in the government learned his name very quickly. And somebody from the Army, are there any veterans in the room? Somebody from the Army wrote me and said, hold on, sir. He is not a veteran. I said, well, what do you mean he's not a veteran? He's not a veteran. He just dresses like a veteran. It's called cosplay. He's like a 75-year-old cosplay guy. Cosplay is costumes. And veterans were offended when they learned that what he would do, he would wear his veteran costume and go to events, and guess what would happen at those events? People loved him. They gave him deference and respect. You assumed you should. And the military wrote me quickly and said, no, we need you to please edit your piece, because he is not a veteran. He just dresses like a veteran. In her face. This is a Donald Trump rally in Greensboro. Let's see if it plays. I'll just show it to you. This one won't play, but I'm going to explain to you what happened. It's in Greensboro, North Carolina, and there's a brother there, and he is a protester. And he is acting a fool at the rally. And he just is going to be disruptive and interrupted, and they put him out. I don't know if you can see it in this image, but behind the black man who's being escorted up the steps, there are 3 officers behind him and 3 officers in front of him. And he's being escorted out, and there are 2 more officers at the top of the steps. If you can see the video, if you've never seen it before, a white man in the crowd decides when he walks up by his aisle, he's going to go up and throw an elbow on the man's face, cuts him right on his orbital bone, and the black man who's being escorted out collapses. And when he falls down, the police then manhandle him and handcuff him and arrest him, the man who was assaulted. And the white man then goes back to his seat. And then after he goes back to his seat, he does this interview. I want you to see it. Hold on, I'll tell you what he says. Hold on, listen. A few of you heard that. He said his favorite part of the event was hitting the man. And if he sees the man again, he might kill him. Now, I don't know a single black man in America who in front of 6 police officers. Now, I know some brothers who would elbow a man in front of police. I do know, I don't want to lie. But I don't know a black man in America who would elbow a man in front of police fully expecting to go have a seat afterwards. Doesn't exist. Not that it has his full mental health and faculties about him. Doesn't exist. It defies all logic. I could pass the microphone to every black man in the room and say, what do you think will happen to you? If in front of 6 police you went and elbowed a man right in front of his face and he collapsed and bleeds, what do you think will happen to you? Think you go back to your seat? Would you do an interview saying it was the highlight of your night? Would you have the gall to get on Inside Edition, black man, and say, if you see that man again, you might kill him? You wouldn't do that. Nobody. I'm talking about you could find a thug all the way. He knows what's going to happen. This is white privilege. This is a man who knew that he was safe. He was among friends. This man is true because we are currently in a dip in the quality of humanity. And I need you to understand that we are in a dip. Like here's a quote from Harriet. I'm paraphrasing Harriet Tubman. She says, "In my life, I freed thousands of slaves, and I would have freed thousands of more if they had only known they were slaves." I'm not calling you a slave. I'm not saying you're slaves. I'm saying if you don't know where we are, if you don't have real context that we are in a dip right now, you'll act like we're not. If you believe the lie that 2017 is better than 2016 and this is peak humanity right now, then you won't accept that we are where we are, and it's deeply problematic. And I created the graph the way it is because the truth is when you are in a dip in the quality of humanity, it is hard as hell to get out of it. Here's another way to look at it. This is my final slide. Now, someone created this one for me, and then I did this one myself. So one looks a lot better than the other. So that is true. I did this one, okay? So but it says what I wanted to say. I want you, please look at it and take a look while I explain it to you. In humanity, when there is an introduction of an innovation that disturbs the dominant power group, ugliness always happens in response. I'll give you 3 instances, then I'll close, and then we'll hang out and take photos and talk and have a good time. I need you to understand where we are and how we got here and how we get out. There are very few, my undergraduate degree is in African American studies and my graduate degree is in history, and I've studied the history of slavery and lynching and state-sanctioned violence, and it's a huge reason why I do what I do. There were very little documented cases of lynching during slavery. Rare. Abuse, yes. Very few cases of lynching. Does anybody, why would that be? Yeah, it's property. You own this human being, and you have expectation that they will perform a certain duty for their entire existence on earth. You may have paid the equivalent of several years of your wages to purchase them. Folk weren't lynching black folk during slavery. Rare, exceedingly rare. But then there was, look at the graph, then there was an introduction of an innovation. The innovation was the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. And guess who that innovation really disturbed? It disturbed the dominant power group in the country. And the dip in response to the innovation was lynching. There was no Klan during slavery. Why not? Black folk and white folk had been here for a couple hundred years. The dip was in response to the innovation. And the innovation disturbed people in power. I go all the way back. Let me show you this one. Another innovation. Hold on. I'll show it to you. Almost there. Hold on. Don't want to go past it. One more. Hold on. Right here. America's prison population was steady for about 300 years. And there was an introduction of an innovation. What was the innovation? The civil rights movement. And guess what got passed? There was something called the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And guess who the Voting Rights Act disturbed? The dominant power structure. And so we see steady, 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 and then I'll go all the way back to the final graph on here. We see an introduction of an innovation, and after the introduction of innovation, right there, the dip is mass incarceration. When there's an introduction of an innovation that disturbs the dominant power group, there is always a response. Here's the dip that we're in. I'll tell you what's really innovative, incredibly innovative. It happened in your lifetime. 43 white presidents. 1, 2, 3, all the way. And then all of a sudden, not only did we elect a black man, but his name was Barack Hussein Obama. Now that sounds common to you, but in 2006 and 2007, as he emerged, it was anything but common. I'm not even passing political judgment. I'm saying it is an innovative thing for a country that has had 43 white presidents to then elect a black man named Barack Hussein Obama. If you've ever seen, I don't know, we're in Florida. Have you been to Disney? Have you been to the Hall of Presidents? When you go to Disney, now I'm not going back to the Hall of Presidents anymore. I can't, that is too much for me. But my family, every time we would go to Disney, we would go in there with a great deal of pride because on the stage, the Hall of Presidents, they had 44 animatronic, very lifelike presidents, and 43 of them were white men, and right in the middle was a black man. Let me break this down for you. If John Kerry had beaten George Bush in 2004 and was president in 2004 and 2008, there would be no Donald Trump. In 2004 and 2008, Donald Trump was appearing at WrestleMania. I'm not joking. He shaved Vince McMahon's head at WrestleMania. That was his that's what he did. He had a reality TV show, which produced no successful entrepreneurs, by the way. Not one person who he hired still works for the company. It's all a ruse. But in 2008, he started saying something that was pretty unique for him. He started saying the black man who had been elected president really was not an American. And he said it over and over and over again. Everywhere he spoke, to the point that he became known for that. And that was not how most of us knew him for the duration of his life. And he became addicted to something that happened. For the first time in his life, he didn't just have fans, he had followers. At first, a few thousand, then tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands, primarily white supremacists and neo-Nazis, began seeing him as a leader of something that is called the birther movement. Donald Trump is a response to the introduction of an innovation. That had there been a mainstream white man, Democrat or Republican, that was president for these past 8 years, there's no credible way that Donald Trump emerges. He emerges because we're in the dip in response. Listen, I read 2 studies about how one was done by a conservative think tank, about how conservatives feel about Obamacare. One study asked conservatives, first it asked them how they felt about Obamacare, and about nearly 90% of them said they hated it. And they asked the same group of conservatives how they felt about the Affordable Care Act. And it dipped down to about 59% of them that hated it. Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act. But 30% more of them hated Obamacare more than the Affordable Care Act. Why? And it's not the care. They don't hate the care of Obamacare. It was the introduction of innovation that disturbed the dominant power structure. Never in the history of this country has a Supreme Court justice died and Congress denied the sitting president the opportunity to appoint the replacement. It's just basic. I know that when a Republican is in office, somebody dies, they're going to appoint somebody, and I'm not going to like them. That's just how it goes. That's what elections are about. It's never happened. Why not? They didn't do that to Bill Clinton. They didn't do that to Jimmy Carter or Lyndon Johnson. Why this Democrat? They asked those same conservatives what their least favorite features of the Affordable Care Act were. Struggled. They mainly said cost. That insurance costs too much. But the rate of inflation of insurance has gone down. Costs have gone up, but at a slower rate than they were before the Affordable Care Act. We talked about it when some of the staff picked me up. Do you know the Affordable Care Act is basically a website where you buy health insurance? It's a website. Have you been there? We talked about it. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, this is the affordable. It's a website that doesn't sell Obamacare. It sells insurance from Aetna and Blue Cross. It sells insurance from the insurance companies. But they're desperate to get rid of it quickly. Affordable Care Act's okay. Obamacare, not so much. Why? Introduction of an innovation. There's always a dip in response. I'll close with this thought. Atlantic Magazine has been in continuous publication since 1858. Ta-Nehisi Coates writes for Atlantic, and he just does brilliant stuff. And I don't even agree with a lot of the thoughts that Ta-Nehisi has, but he's so brilliant. I read everything that he writes. They've been in continuous publication since 1858, and right before the election, they endorsed Hillary Clinton. And several people wrote me and said, you gotta read this, you gotta read it. And like I campaigned for Bernie, I voted for Hillary, but I wasn't excited to read an endorsement. And they said, you gotta read this, man, it's something, and it shook me. The endorsement was actually kind of a backhanded compliment, where they said they really weren't excited about Hillary Clinton, but were choosing to endorse her, and they gave this explanation, and I think about it almost every day. They said that since 1858, we have endorsed 2 presidential candidates. They said, we endorsed Abraham Lincoln in 1860, and they republished their endorsement. He was a Republican, okay? And they republished their endorsement, and they said, in their endorsement, they said, we believe our country is about to be split in 2. And we believe that this is the only man who can save the Union and also possibly in the process end the institution of slavery. They endorsed Abraham Lincoln. He won the election. There was the Civil War, but he did save the Union, and there was the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation. They then waited. They were in continuous publication. They endorsed no one in the 1870s, 80s, 90s, 1900s, 10s, 20s, 1930s, 40s, 50s. They waited 104 years until they endorsed another presidential candidate. And they endorsed Lyndon Johnson in 1964, and they republished their endorsement. And their endorsement of Johnson was a lot like their endorsement of Hillary Clinton. They said, Lyndon Johnson is actually not our favorite politician. We have some deep concerns and problems with him, but let us tell you why, after 104 years of silence, why we're endorsing him. Our president was just assassinated. And we believe that to continue the legacy of John F. Kennedy, to continue the policies and to possibly keep this country from sinking into some type of anarchy or splitting in two because of the divide of the civil rights movement, we are choosing to endorse the man that we think will pass meaningful civil rights legislation and will help us have continuity in our government. And Lyndon Johnson did. He signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the two most important pieces of civil rights legislation in over 100 years. And they were right. And they said, this is what got me, there were 3 times we felt it necessary to get involved: the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and now. I started by saying it's hard to understand a moment in history when you're in it. Atlantic Magazine said, when we look at trends throughout human history, we see the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and we see the era that we live in today. Here's the primary difference. When you lived in the Civil War and you lived in the Civil Rights Movement, you knew it. And I need you to understand, as Atlantic Magazine understood, that we are in that. That time is this time. And understanding the time you're in will drastically affect the life you live. I say it like this all the time. There's no need for you to act, because I used to play these mind movies with myself, even as I was a teenager, and I would wonder, what would I do if I lived in the Civil Rights Movement? Who would I be? What would I stand for? Would I shrink back and shirk in fear, or would I stand up and speak out and be bold? That's not even the right question. You don't have to ask and wonder who you would be if you were alive in the 60s. You need to look at 2017 and say, who am I today? Who is this world demanding that I be? As I think about Dr. King, who has inspired me throughout my life, he was a man who deeply understood the moment. He understood the time. He was 39 when he was killed. I like to play with this online. Did you know that he was younger than Jay-Z, Nas, and Andre and Big Boy from Outkast? Like, when you think of those people, you don't think of old folk. He was younger than they are now when he was killed. When he led the Montgomery bus boycott, he was 25 years old. He was still finishing his PhD. He had finished the classes and was working on the dissertation. But he knew the moment, and he knew what the moment required of him. And I'm leaving you with this. You need to know what this moment requires of you. It's going to require you to be different. It's going to require you to be principled. It's going to require you to speak out. It's going to require you to get involved locally and nationally. And I'm not here to tell you exactly how to do it, but that the moment requires that you do it. I know it's serious. I know it's heavy, but that's the time we're in. All right? Thank you. God bless you.